Hello and welcome to our special catch-up with the Treasurer of Australia, Mr. Josh Frydenberg. And we're going to ask some of the questions that people in business would be asking themselves and might not know the answers to it. So welcome to the program, Mr. Treasurer.
Good to be with you, Peter.
Can I just go straight to the heart of the matter? When it comes to the JobKeeper payment, we know employees where a business is suffering a 30% or more fall in revenue will be able to put their workers in place for the JobKeeper payment. But there are other sorts of businesses, and people are asking me this question. So sole traders, will they be able to?
Yes, they will. I mean, this is a $130 billion wage subsidy, Peter, the scale and scope of which this country has not seen. Whether you're part-time, full-time workers, casuals who've been with their employer for 12 months or more, sole traders, or those who are working in the not-for-profit sector, they'll all benefit.
Yeah. So if you've got two partners in a business, can both get JobKeeper?
It's one per entity in relation to that. And of course, you've got to meet the turnover test.
Okay. Where do people go to actually see all the details around the turnover test?
ato.gov.au is where they register their interest, and the ATO is already providing guidance notes and additional information for employers to provide to their employees and documents to fill out. Their first payments, Peter, will go from the first week in May, and of course the treasury.gov.au website also provides some fact sheets on the program.
Okay. Now this is one that a lot of people have been asking me, and I know you've provided the answer, but unfortunately the language is created either by accountants, lawyers or public servants who are all brilliant, like you, Treasurer, but the question is, does the employer take tax out of the $1,500?
It's treated as taxable income, and that's consistent with other similar programs overseas.
Does the money actually go to the employer first and he or she passes it on to the employee?
The money is given through the employer to the employee, and the whole idea here is to maintain that formal connection, Peter, between the employer and the employee, so that we can bounce back on the other side stronger than ever.
Is the 9.5% super taken out of the full amount or the amount that's relevant to the wage that the wage earner usually gets?
Well, for example, if you were normally earning $1,000 a fortnight, but now you are getting the JobKeeper payment, you're getting $1,500 a fortnight, then the SG would be paid on that first $1,000, but doesn't need to be paid on that additional amount. And that's how the program is going to be run.
Now, this one has surprised me, Treasurer, and some accountants have said this is the case. If a worker is on the $1,500 payment, but has effectively been stood down and the businesses say, stay there until we're back to normal, I'm going to bring you back, that the super doesn't have to be paid. Is that right?
Well, not if you're stood down, the SG is not being paid on that straight $1,500 payment, but if the business continues to operate and you continue to get the amount that you were getting pre-pandemic, yet the wage subsidy is helping you, then the SG would be paid in its normal way.
If you put your hand up for JobSeeker, but then as the additional packages came along and you could get JobKeeper, can you switch, and how do you switch?
Well, that's when you engage directly with your employer, but also with Services Australia.
So if a casual worker was only on $200 a fortnight, will they get the $1,500?
They do, and there is some people who will be receiving more through the JobKeeper package than they otherwise would be the case. But that casual employee has to fulfil the criteria, namely that they have to have been in a regular and systematic working relationship with the employer for 12 months or more.
This is an interesting one as well. I got this on a current affair. Full-time worker on JobKeeper, but he gets a chance to maybe drive a cab or something like that. Can he do casual work and keep his JobKeeper payment?
You can, and obviously you've got to work through your employer, but we're not wanting people to earn less, we're wanting people to earn more. And if they can supplement their income that way, then that's okay with the JobKeeper program.
And I guess you'd like them to spend all of it, every dollar of it, to keep the economy going.
Well, as you know, Peter, more than $4.5 billion has recently made its way into people's pockets with the $750 cash payments that were part of our first tranche. All that money is being spent, and no doubt this JobKeeper money will be spent too.
Keep the tricky questions coming, Treasurer. Here they come.
Yeah.
I've worked for someone for 3 years. I stopped working for them for 3 months. I've come back for 4 months. I don't pass the 12 months test as a casual worker. But the fact I've been there for a long period, does that give me any dispensation from that rule?
No, again, we go with the Fair Work concept. It's an established concept of having regular and a systematic connection to your employer for 12 months or more.
Here's another question I've got from lots of businesses. I have not done well. I've done okay in March, but April and going forward, my business is going to be absolutely chaosed. How do I prove that my revenue has gone down? Should I get my accountant on board and go to the tax office and plead the case?
I've just learned a new word from you, Peter, chaos. You've been watching too much of Maxwell Smart.
Most definitely.
But in the event that you're expecting your turnover to decline as a result of the pandemic, then again you should register your interest with the ATO, provide them with the relevant information, and you will become eligible as a result of your turnover falling below the threshold.
Okay. I think a lot of people are also a little bit confused around effectively what I've been calling the tax rebate. So I'm an employer, I remit taxes to the ATO for wages for my employees.
Yep. Tax withheld.
And we've read that there's back payments. So there's effectively, is there 2 periods starting from January through to, it's not June, is it? It's like April, then from May on to September 27.
You're talking about the cash flow boost that we're providing to small businesses. So hundreds of thousands of small businesses will benefit, and the amount that they receive is a reflection of the size of their wages bill. There will be a minimum of $20,000 paid to those eligible businesses and a maximum of $100,000, and they will be in those two payment periods.
Yeah. So effectively, as an employer, as I am, you send the money off to the ATO like you normally do, but the ATO then will give you a credit for the amounts you've paid. And if I've only sent 7,000 over that period, I would get 10,000 back in the first period and another 10,000 back in the other.
The minimum you can get is 10,000 per period, and as I said, that's a maximum of 20, up to a maximum of $100,000 over those 2 periods, and it will be done automatically by the tax office. You don't need to fill in any forms, and the money will soon start to flow, and that money will be used, Peter, to pay for the fixed costs of keeping a business, even one in hibernation, as well as meeting the cost of employees.
Yeah. You're going to go down in history as the Santa Claus treasurer of all time, Mr. Frydenberg.
It's not exactly what I was expecting to do.
No, but it's not a bad rap. What if my business is reasonably new? I've only been going 3 or 4 months. I've got employees. Yeah. I'm clearly on a roll. Is that going to be a matter of going to the ATO and just basically proving the case?
Well, there is a discretion there with the ATO because, as you say, some businesses are startup businesses, so they don't have a comparable period last year with their turnover to compare to what is happening to them this year. So too, you've got a situation, Peter, where businesses may have been going through the drought last year, and so therefore their turnover would be unusually low, and which doesn't provide a realistic base to compare their turnover this year to. So again, we've allowed for the tax commissioner to have a discretion because we want to be as flexible as possible so that this program can help as many people as possible.
Treasurer, if someone wants to access their super, there's a deadline, isn't there? Is it April 30?
Well, the April 20 is when we'll start to to see those registrations take place. Already people are indicating their interest on the MyGov website, and from that date, we will start to see the information provided by the ATO onwards to the super funds, and the super funds are expected to provide that money to people as soon as possible. Importantly, Peter, you have to understand there's an existing hardship provision within the superannuation system. And what we're doing is building on that, because ultimately it's the people's money. And, there's $3 trillion worth in money in super, and Treasury's initial forecasts was around $27 billion would be called on early by people. And so that's less than 1% of the total funds under management. Also, we are ensuring that money is taken out tax-free, because, as you know, the usual tax rate paid by people taking money out of their super is around 22%.
So I guess there'll be another deadline if you want to try and get another 10,000 out after July 1.
Well, there'll be another period of time for the second, for the period after this financial year.
All right. Now, these questions have come from...
but we're expecting... people will continue to indicate their interest in taking money out of super, but we're asking them to do it as soon as possible. And April 20 is when is part of the initial period.
Okay. Now, these questions come from Combank's Group Executive of Business and Private Banking, Mike Vasey-Lyle, who's been, wanting to get as much information out as possible. And Mike's asked two questions, Treasurer. One is, what has the take-up been like on the JobKeeper support, and how many businesses have applied?
Well more than 850,000 have already indicated their interest on the ATO website. That represents sole traders, big businesses, small businesses, those in the not-for-profit sector. We're estimating around 6 million Australian workers will be eligible for this scheme. That's nearly half the Australian workforce, Peter.
Okay. Second question for Mike was, do we have sufficient dry powder options post 6 months, that is after September?
Well, we've got this program running for 6 months, and it's consistent with the length of our other programs, which reflects the environment that we're in. Importantly, $320 billion has been put to work by the government, as well as with the RBA, to support liquidity in the financial system, to provide a cash flow boost to businesses. We've talked about to provide cash payments to households. But this is all part of our full court press to support the economy in what is a very difficult time.
Okay. Now, this question you only get when you play radio Russian roulette with people ringing in, but it was a really good question, Treasurer. So maybe your public servant colleagues and your parliamentary colleagues haven't thought about this one. Let's just see. What happens if your boss just wants to do nothing? He or she goes into the fetal position and doesn't want to fill in any forms, and therefore I can't access JobKeeper. What do I do if I've got a boss like that?
Well, we want employers that are eligible to apply, because for them, what they'll do is get a $1,500 a fortnight wage subsidy that they can provide direct to their employees. Now, it's in their interest to maintain their employees on the books, because even if the health restrictions right now, Pete, mean that they've had to close their doors and they're not seeing the foot traffic through their stores, they do know there's going to be the other side of this. And the wage subsidy is government support at an incredibly difficult time.
But I guess for that sort of person, and look, Josh, before you became an abnormal, an extraordinary person, namely the Treasurer of the country, you probably hung around with normal blokes who could actually
still do.
who could go missing in action and go surfing, or if they're allowed to, and therefore their employees could be left high and dry. I guess that sort of person would go to JobSeeker.
Well, look, obviously, if you're not eligible for JobKeeper, then JobSeeker is the alternative, and both programs should be seen as complementary. But we would be calling on all employers that were eligible because their turnover had fallen below the threshold to register their interest with the ATO, to fill in the forms. They're not going to be too onerous, but to support their employee, but ultimately to support themselves, to support their business, because there will be the other side to this pandemic.
Okay. I guess the last question I should ask you is, if people have more questions and want to know more about, what is the best, easiest to read website out there, apart from switzer.com.au, of course?
Well, again, the ato.gov.au and treasury.gov.au are two websites with plenty of information, but also they can contact the ATO directly. They're, of course, focused on the implementation phase. This is a massive program. It's now passed through the Parliament. It's had bipartisan support. It will make a real difference to people's lives, and it will keep Australians in a job.
Treasurer, thanks for giving us your time.
Always good to be with you.